This week, the latest DC film Blue Beetle drops in theaters. DC fans are known for their passionate opinions, and I asked for your DC hot takes and controversial opinions, and you shared over 500 flaming hot takes. So today, I am going to react to your hottest takes. Let's fight.
Let them fight.
Kicking things off with the hottest of the hot, The Dark Knight is the most overrated movie of all time.
How dare you!
I don't understand how a B-tier movie literally gets more praise than religious texts. Oh boy, wow, you went for it there on that one. Dark Knight is overrated and it's B-tier. So when we say overrated doesn't mean bad. It just means the amount of praise that it receives is above where the movie actually is at. And when you have a movie like The Dark Knight that is widely regarded as the greatest comic book movie of all time, the best Batman movie, the best DC film, and literally won Oscars, it's a prime candidate to be considered overrated because it is so highly rated that you can only kind of go down from there. So in that regard, I think there's certain contexts where it can be overrated in the sense that there's people that just really put it on just such a pedestal that you can't criticize anything about the film. I do think there are a couple like scenes that end with loose threads. I think there's some rushed plot points, some things that don't fully work. All that said, B-tier movie?
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Come on now. B-tier movie? This is a film that did what more comic book movies need to do, which is it went outside of its own genre. I've been using this term more and more, but there's a lot of like creative inbreeding in the comic book movie genre where modern comic book movies are too influenced by past comic book movies. Too many comic book movies rely entirely on nostalgia of past films and going multiverse and just pulling people back into our new movie or into our current movie. But when you have something like The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan talks about in the book, the Nolan Variations, highly recommend you check it out if you're a Nolan fan, how with Batman Begins, he wasn't looking to comic book movies, he was looking to action movies. When it came time to do The Dark Knight, he was reading The Long Halloween, but he was also going to movies like Heat from Michael Mann. When it came to the Joker, he's looking at inspiration from Sid Vicious. He's pulling from the outside and merging that with the comic book continuity of the past and doing something fresh, new, and different. So like just B tier, hey, we all like different things. Sometimes we don't resonate with something. I just don't even know what you're talking about there. The idea that it's B tier, come on now, B tier, Dark Knight, this is great stuff here. Could it be a little bit overrated in certain senses? I'll grant that. B tier, no, Nolan delivered. Next one on here, Condiment King is Batman's greatest villain of all time.
How I've relished this meeting. You, the dynamic Dark Knight, versus me, the conceptual Condiment King.
Real quick, there's a companion video to this over on my Patreon page with my reactions to even more of your DC hot takes. Join at any level and you gain access to that video as well as hundreds of others, as well as hundreds of live streams that I do. Join at $2 per month or about $21 per year. You gain access to all of those videos. At $5 per month, you can have your name on my end card. And then at the top tier, you get actually a one-on-one video chat with me every single month. So that's pretty cool. We can talk about movies, YouTube, whatever you want to talk about. We can do that if you join at that top tier. Link is down below in the description if you want to learn more about it. Superman the movie and Superman 2 are painfully dated and extremely overrated.
You're breaking my heart.
Could never take either of them seriously with their age, which is why I find Man of Steel to be a superior film no matter what the detractors say to the contrary. You are ripping my heart out with this brutal take on the Richard Donner Superman films. I'll give you 50% credit on this one too. I don't think the movies have aged well at all. I think they're very clearly dated. Any fair, reasonable read on Richard Donner's Superman, it obviously is a dated film. And so when when I praise the film to them, I don't really know if they'll like it or not. You know, my buddy Cody Leach, I don't think he's ever seen the Richard Donner Superman films. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't care for them overall. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And when younger fans of my channel are trying to dive into the history of comic book movies, I'm not surprised if they just can't get into Richard Donner Superman because they are very old films. 45 years old. In which case the flying effects look pretty ridiculous now, very cheesy. There's a lot of corny humor. Compared to Batman 66, it's a lot more serious, but there's no shortage of camp in those movies at the same time. There's a oh shucks nature to the movies that doesn't feel like it fits in the genre anymore. There's that simplicity to it. I would say the idea that they're overrated, though, you can say that it's dated while also saying this is still so important that, of course, it's one of the greatest in the genre. Superman the movie invented the genre that we know of as the superhero blockbuster. These big budget, treating comic book properties as something that's serious, that you get big name actors, that you spend a lot of money on, that you get a fantastic score. This is the biggest genre in the world. It has been for over 10 years, but for 15, 20 years it has been. And it goes back to Superman the movie. Kevin Feige has said every time they do a new Marvel movie, they go back and they watch Richard Donner's Superman. They took these comics and they went, this is American mythology, so we're going to get the writer of The Godfather to write this film. Mario Puzo wrote this initial draft that they worked off of. They got The Godfather himself to play Jor-El. They got Gene Hackman at the top of his fame to be Lex Luthor. The previous theatrical big comic book movie was Batman 66. It was just an adaptation of a TV show. And the Salkinds had the vision to invent this genre that so many of us love. You can't, that's not overrating it. That's just fact. When you talk about influence on the genre, this is the movie that invented it. I genuinely think the costumes in Batman and Robin are pretty solid. If you remove the nipples from Batman and Robin's suits, people wouldn't have an issue with them. That's a big if. I just think the other bad things about the movie's performance, tone, and humor, etc., have painted how people view the costumes. I mean, that's a little bit like saying, hey, if you ignore the elephant in the room, this is a totally normal room. But there is an elephant in the room. And so as much as your room might be normal outside of the elephant, an elephant is a big deal. And nipples on the bat suit is pretty freaking weird.
Weird.
And it's not just that they're there. The movie does suit up montages where it stares at the nipples, zooms in on their butts, zooms in on the cod pieces. And so it draws attention to the weirdness. There's even quotes from Tim Burton where he moved away from doing Batman 3 because Batman Returns got Warner Brothers in a lot of trouble with McDonald's because they were selling kids' toys and the movie was too dark. And then Tim Burton was like, really? You're calling me too dark and weird? And then you go put nipples on the bat suits? You guys are the freaking weirdos, not me. That's true. Putting nipples on there, it's so specific and it's so weird. But it wasn't just nipples. They're anatomically correct suits. So it's all of the six-pack and there's all this muscle separation. I think all of the stuff where it's supposed to look like a muscular body is kind of weird. Others, the colors get so wacky and bright that they stand out. They look like toys. And overtly, the creators have said they designed the movie to sell toys.
There was a real desire at the studio, a word I had never heard before, more toyetic, which means that what you create makes toys that can sell.
The DCAMU, from Flashpoint Paradox to Apocalypse War, was a better DC universe than the DCEU. The DCAMU projects connected more than just cameos, and there was a threaded plot line. I'll say this. There's a difference between a better universe, a better continuity, and having better movies as individual items. The way you phrased that the DCAMU was a better universe than the DCEU, I think that is obviously true. That is clearly true, but the vast, bunch of the DC, I prefer the DCU individual films over most of the individual films in the DCAMU. I think there's a lot of great films in the DCEU, but it's a terrible continuity. It's a terrible universe when I'm referring to that through line, the plot line, and that's the fault of Warner Brothers horribly managing it, where the starting point, if you don't know the backstory of the DCEU, while David Goyer was writing The Dark Knight Rises, he took a week off to just clear his mind. He was just to break through some writer's block. And he came up with an idea, Superman movie. He pitched it to Christopher Nolan, who took it to the WB. This is Christopher Nolan falling after The Dark Knight. If Christopher Nolan says, hey, I've got an idea for a Superman movie, of course they're going to say yes. So they said yes. And then they brought in Zack Snyder to be the director of the project. But the whole premise was, if Superman arrived, that would be the biggest event in human history. And then by the time you get over to Batman v Superman, just the second movie, they're trying to play catch up with the Avengers. So all of a sudden we have Batman in there. It's Dawn of Justice. So Wonder Woman's in there, and we're having Batman watch YouTube videos of the other members of the Justice League. And so then they're playing catch up. And by the time we get to the third movie, Suicide Squad, WB gets cold feet. They're backtracking. They're trying to change everything. And the movie that was written isn't the movie that they want to get made. And you get to the fourth or fifth movie with Justice League, and it goes off the rails, and it's a disaster. And then they're trying to course correct. And so Aquaman is super silly. And then we're going to do individual stories. There's no continuity here. It's not consistent within itself. They couldn't stick to any vision. So as a continuity, it's not very good. Contrast with that with the DCAMU, they actually stuck to this idea of, we started a new timeline with Flashpoint Paradox. And so you see the growing relationship between Batman and Damian Wayne and all sorts of stuff. And they reference back to the other movies. It's an actual through line plot. And then it closes out the continuity with Apocalypse War. It's pretty cool. If you haven't checked them out, I did a ranking of them. You can do it up there. I watched all of them in a short window. Actually, I watched Apocalypse War and I went, that was really cool. Now I want to rewatch all of these. So I watched through all of them, did the ranking, and it's a really good continuity. I don't think any of those individual films are like competing with my favorite DCEU films as individual entities. They're hour and 15 minutes. There's only so much you can do with that. But as a continuity, it's very cool. Real quick, before I react to your final hot takes, I've done a bunch of other hot take reaction videos. In particular, last month, I did a video called Hot Takes and Hot Wings. One of the coolest videos I've ever done. It was me and my buddy Andy talking about Star Wars hot takes while eating very hot wings. But I've also done other videos in this exact format on Spider-Man as well as the MCU. You can check those out right up here when this video's over with. DC has a brighter future than Marvel right now. I will actually agree with this one. I will say that I am on the same page with you. Big reason for that is when I look at the MCU right now, it feels like Kevin Feige's continuing down a path that I don't think is really working. The current trajectory is rocky for me, that they're doubling, tripling down on this multiverse saga. It's called the Multiverse Saga, and I feel like we're a little bit multiversed out. Like, we've gotten the novelty out of that we want, but that's the name of the saga, and we haven't even paid it off yet. Their introduction to Kang didn't wow us the way that it was supposed to. And so I look at the year and a half, 2 years of Marvel movies, and they're not very exciting to me. There's not like ones that I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And when you get like 2-3 years in the future, you get Fantastic Four and the next Avengers films, and on borrowed trust, I'm pumped for those. But, like the Marvels, Captain America 4, these aren't ones that I'm the most excited about. Thunderbolts, it's like, okay. It doesn't feel like we've got our like top tier stuff. I don't trust the story group right now. It feels like they're struggling with how much content they're putting out. And then I look at DC, which certainly has its own struggles right now, but they're doing a reset. And I think they fumbled how they're doing that. I think it's baffling that they decided to announce it the way that they did. I've got a lot of questions. It's not that I don't have my concerns also about DC, But what I see them doing is going, what we're doing isn't working, so we're going to make hard choices to try and course correct. And we're going to step on toes. It's going to be frustrating, but we're trying to get it right. And so because of that, it's easier to be excited because I want to see what this new thing is. I want to see what the change is. There are some projects in there that I am very excited about. I'm willing to give James Gunn a try and see what he's going to do here. And so for that reason, it's brighter because there's something more to be excited about to see if this will work. What will it be? Those are exciting questions. Whereas like, I can see where the MCU's headed because we've been heading down this path for several years now. There's a long track record that I can evaluate it based off of. And it feels like my excitement and momentum for MCU, it's dwindling, not rising. Whereas a reboot is a momentum starter, a momentum launcher. The CGI in The Flash isn't nearly as atrocious as people make it out to be. I think it looks pretty good for the most part. Only the beginning sequence looks kind of bad. As someone that really liked, maybe loved The Flash, but the CGI, that's not the hill I'm going to die on when it comes to defending that film. And I think all of the effects feel a little bit off to me. Even like when he's running, it feels like there's absolutely no weight to his steps. Like he's just floating above the ground, being dragged across. And you can see the behind the scenes stuff, and that's literally what's happening. He's on wires and he's running, not engaging with the ground. And even the CGI shots of him running, there's just no weight at all. He's just floating on top of the ground, moving too quick. So there's a disconnect between his legs and what you're seeing happening. So even some of the stuff, like the big CGI shots at the beginning of the movie, it looks like he's running in slow-mo while the world around him is flying by. So this just looks off. But then beyond that, the way that they decided to render the Speed Force and the time travel aspect to it, I get that they didn't want it to look realistic as in like our world, but it needs to look like a believable reality. And what you're seeing looks like a PlayStation 2 cutscene.
This is so painful to watch.
It doesn't look like an artistic rendering, a creative rendering of an idea. It feels like an unfinished version. And so I just think it's a movie that comes off cartoonish. Things look unfinished. Some of the effects, they just didn't come up with the right way to visualize it. So he looks like he's flying over the ground. These time things, they look just improperly rendered. Not like the director, Andy, had a clear idea of what he was trying to do. And so it's lacking in that regard. If you want to see more of my reactions to your flaming hot takes, consider joining over on Patreon to see that companion video. Also remember, I've talked about Star Wars in my hot takes and hot wings video, as well as the MCU and Star Wars. You can check those out over in that playlist right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.